Knives Sports Adventures, another very exciting, at least for me, and that's what matters for me, right? My excitement. Knife video here. Today I am reviewing the Zero Tolerance 0452 CF, and I am not even going to try to hide my enthusiasm for this knife. This is now taking over the spot of my favorite folding knife that I have ever owned. One of these days I need to do an EDC video just kind of showing my EDC rotation, but the fact that this has kicked off all the other knives out of my favorite spot is an incredible accomplishment. I love this knife. So let's kind of break down what's going on here. This is a bearing flipper, right? Roughly 4-inch blade, carbon fiber on one side, titanium frame lock on the other side, bearing flipper. Zero Tolerance, as usual, has done a great job with their ergonomics here, but they've really outdone themselves on this one. This has a flipper that's almost 90 degrees there, sticks out very easy to catch with your finger. It's got some good jimping where it's aggressive, but it's not overly aggressive, so it's not going to catch anything. There is not a sharp edge to catch your hand or be uncomfortable anywhere on this knife. Everything has been rounded over, even on the inside edges of the back of the blade, or the back of the handle and the front there. The jimping is rounded over on the edges like it should be. It's just absolutely beautifully done as far as the ergonomics. For me, having my relatively large hands, this knife fits perfectly in my hand. My fingers go right in the groove. Everybody kind of talks about this being such a large knife, but it doesn't really feel very large, to carry or to have in your pocket. Weight-wise, if we're looking at weight on this thing, it's only 4.3 ounces. So not really a lot of weight given the amount of blade that you're carrying. So if you're looking at knives to compare size, this is a 4-inch cold steel tie light. You can see it's not that much bigger. Here's a Benchmade Griptilian. It is bigger than the Griptilian, but it's not, it's not huge. Here's a Microtech Ultratech, so significantly bigger than the Ultratech. Handle is about, half an inch longer there. If you look at knives that are considered to be large folders, so here's a Benchmade SOCP folder. This knife is narrower left to right and slightly different shape. Blade is actually longer on the SOCP folder, as is the handle, but this knife ergonomically fits better, fills my hand better, just overall nicer to hold than the SOCP. Obviously here's your ridiculous 6-inch cold steel tie light at the very top there, so it's much smaller than that, kind of to give you the range of where we're looking at here on size. For me, pretty ideal. So there's really nothing bad to say about this knife. There's some interesting ergonomic details I do want to go over. If you look at what they've done with the handle and the blade, they've angled the handle this way so that when you're holding the knife, the blade actually comes down closer to your hand on the front than it does on the back. That means when you're pushing with your thumb on the blade, you have much better leverage on the bottom part of the blade than you would with something that goes straight across like this. So this, when I'm gripping this comfortably, this is the Benchmade SOCP. The start of the actual cutting surface is about a finger width above where my hand would go. If you look here, where I'm gripping this comfortably, it's a bit closer. And what that does is just give you better leverage when you're cutting something hard on the blade, and it gives you better purchase on the cut and allows you to use that blade more effectively. It also kind of shortens the overall length of the blade feel, given that this is such a long blade. I like the straight edge. I like the small curve up here. It's not too deep that it gets out of your way, or gets in your way. They've taken some weight out of the spine without getting rid of the thickness there. Just overall very well done. I do like the slight jimping on the titanium here, combined with the leaving this part of the carbon fiber unpolished. Gives you better grip than you would expect from a titanium handle knife. Sometimes they can be slippery. This one does not feel slippery. My only real quibble with this knife is the pocket clip. So the stock pocket clip is the typical zero tolerance folded steel deal. It's supposed to be a deep carry clip, but the way they've folded it, there's not actually enough room in the clip for your pants to go up in there, so it doesn't function as a deep carry clip. This is a MXG Gear custom titanium pocket clip that I just had to have for this knife because it looks really cool and it is easier on your hand, so it actually makes the knife more comfortable. So that is available. Cutting wise, edge performance, this did 175 cuts on my bamboo dowel sharpness test before it started tearing paper. Puts it in the really good edge retention wise. Not the best I've ever seen, but definitely very usable, very carryable. The blade is S35 VN. Some of the earlier models of this knife supposedly had some issues with heat treat where they weren't holding an edge very well. This serial number is up in the 20,000 range. Supposedly those were all okay. This one definitely is okay. So be aware of that if you're buying a used one or something. Some of the lower serial numbers, apparently the heat treat wasn't very good and they didn't hold an edge as well. So let's go ahead and jump into the disassembly. Disassembly on this knife is pretty straightforward. You got a pivot here, T8, and this does turn, so that pivot is apparently not keyed. So I'm going to need a second T8 here. I like to do these disassemblies without having done a lot to them before if I can, because that gives you an accurate view of what it's like to disassemble this knife without preparing and knowing what I'm doing beforehand. I'm going to close that just for the safety of my own fingers while I get to both sides of it here. Might be some Loctite on that pivot. I may have to get something to grip that. I was planning on needing this, so we're going to have to do a different strategy here. There's a reason I do these videos near my toolbox. I know this is not the preferred strategy for using a hex bit, but this is what I have without stopping the video. Alright, or Torx bit rather. There's the pivot coming out. Might be a bit much Loctite on that pivot. Magnetic tray so I don't lose anything. Pop the blade out. Okay, so I am going to have to take apart the other screws. Here's my T6 for the back couple of screws. I'll take off the carbon fiber side first since I started there. There's one. There's two. Let's see if that lifts off. Okay, it is lifting off. So what you've got here is fairly standard. You have a washer embedded in the carbon fiber there to give the bearings a hard surface to spin on. so that they don't eat into the carbon fiber. You've got your standoffs here, and you've got your bearings that are set into both the blade and the carbon fiber. Small bit of surface rust there. I've been carrying this knife for a while. So the bearing is actually only recessed on one side here. It's recessed on the carbon fiber side, and I'm going to clean this before I reassemble it. So that leaves more thickness to the blade back in the knife portion. I like to see that because it means there's going to be a bit more durability there. These bearings recessed around the pivot, not a keyed pivot. There that is. And then those bearings look like they're just riding on the titanium, which is probably fine. It might be nice to see a little bit of a steel washer there, but because they've recessed the bearing completely into the titanium on that side, there's not as much thickness here. Since it's titanium, I don't anticipate that being a problem as far as durability, but I can see why they didn't take it down enough to do a stainless steel washer in there. There's the overstop travel on the frame lock. One thing that's nice about this frame lock is even though it's a slender knife, you can see they've left a lot of material down here at the bottom. I am measuring just about 12 millimeters worth of material, titanium left over at the bottom there, and it is about 1.2 millimeters thick of titanium here, so it's a decently large amount of material. Gives you a good sturdy frame lock. There's no, there's not a little flex this way in and out. So good sturdy build, even on the slender knife. Like I said, this has become my favorite carry knife. It's relatively overbuilt for such a long slender knife. It's light for its size. Even though it's a large knife, it doesn't really carry that large. Spectacular knife. Absolutely buttery flipper action. Some other videos out there you can see people are very surprised about how smooth it is given that it's a production knife, and really satisfying and durable. The flipper action really hasn't changed. It hasn't loosened up or anything since I've had mine. So one thing that I really want to bring out with the durability of this CT0452CF is the way they've maximized the durability of this knife through the way they've placed their materials. So if you look at the surface of the blade here that actually contacts the frame lock, you've got about 7 millimeters of surface there. That actually makes contact with the steel portion of the frame lock here as you're opening the blade. If you look at a similarly sized knife like the Kubi Dandy 2.0, and you look at the area that contacts the frame lock, you can see it's only about half the size, right? It's that little piece right there. So this knife is actually, the zero tolerance is designed a lot more for hard use than you would expect for something in that long slender knife range. So wanted to point that out. Really good design feature, and hope you enjoyed. Keep adventuring.